The village of Nthula woke each morning to the gentle murmur of the river Suma, whose waters curled through the red soil like veins through living skin. To the people, the river was not just a source of water. It was a living spirit that remembered faces, that saw into hearts, that could bless or curse depending on the truth that lived inside those it mirrored. Every home faced toward it, every prayer began beside it, and every lie, no matter how small, was whispered far away from its banks. The villagers said that when you looked into the Suma, it didn't show who you were, it showed who you truly were. Amelie had grown beside that river, and even as a child she seemed to belong to it. At 23, her beauty was not only in her face but in her gentleness, her soft laughter that rippled like sunlight on water. When she sang by the river, even the birds fell silent. The elders said her reflection glowed when she sang, that the river itself shimmered brighter in answer, as though her soul spoke in a language only the water understood. "The river knows her," old Makulu would whisper, tapping his staff against the mud. "It carries her truth." Children followed Amelie when she walked to fetch water, hoping to see the miracle for themselves. They would crouch beside her calabash and gasp when her reflection brightened, a faint golden light spreading across the surface. Some called it a blessing from the ancestors. Others said the river had chosen her for something greater, though no one knew what. Amelie herself never boasted about it. She would only smile, her eyes calm, her hands steady as she dipped her gourd. "The river shines for all who carry clean hearts," she would say. That afternoon the sun was high, and the air shimmered with heat. Amelie carried her woven basket and sang softly as she walked the narrow path through the reeds. The scent of wild lilies hung thick in the air. When she reached the riverbank, she knelt and set her calabash on the smooth stones. The water looked strange that day, darker, slower. She leaned over it and saw her reflection staring back, bright as always but somehow uneasy. For a moment it trembled as if trying to speak. The song caught in her throat. She blinked and the glow in her reflection flickered, fading to gray before returning again. A chill crept across her arms despite the heat. The reeds nearby rustled though there was no wind. The water, usually playful, had fallen utterly still. The laughter of distant children sounded muffled as though swallowed by the air. Amelie whispered, "What troubles you, old friend?" Her reflection blinked slower than she did. It was only a heartbeat's delay, but it froze her where she knelt. The wind rose suddenly, cold and sharp, stirring the surface into spirals. The sky dimmed and ripples spread outward from where her hands touched the water. It felt colder than it should, cold like metal, like the breath of something ancient waking from sleep. She withdrew her fingers, droplets clinging to her skin like tiny mirrors. Behind her, a frog croaked and then went silent. The silence that followed was deep, strange, as if even the earth held its breath. Amelie's heart began to pound. She glanced around the quiet riverbank, half expecting to see someone hiding among the reeds. But she was alone. Only the river watched her, its dark eyes unblinking. Slowly she rose, clutching her calabash to her chest. The reflection on the water dimmed again, shivered, then steadied. But something had changed. The river no longer looked like a friend. It looked like it was waiting. She turned to leave, but before she could take a step, a single gust of wind rushed past her, bending the grasses low and scattering the petals of the lilies. When the wind died, the surface of the river had gone flat and silent, a sheet of dark glass. No shimmer, no glow. She could no longer tell where her reflection ended and the water began. The feeling that something unseen had stirred below the surface would not leave her. Amelie whispered a quiet prayer, one her grandmother had taught her long ago, and walked away without looking back. But as she did, the water rippled once more, softly as though sighing her name. Nia had always been the pride of her family, the first daughter of a respected hunter, the girl who could weave the finest mats and whose laughter once filled the courtyards of Nthula. When she walked through the market, people greeted her with warmth, and mothers whispered to their daughters, "Be like Nia, strong, clever, beautiful." But that was before Amelie's songs began to gather the village beneath the great baobab tree, before the children stopped asking Nia to tell stories and instead begged to hear Amelie sing. Slowly, the attention that once belonged to her slipped away like water through fingers. Every smile that turned toward Amelie felt like a stone pressed against Nia's chest. At first she tried to hide it. She forced herself to clap when Amelie sang, to praise her cousin's kindness, to remind herself that love was not a competition. But envy is a quiet poison. It waits, seeps, and settles deep. Each evening, when Amelie's voice floated over the fields and the river answered her song with shimmering ripples, Nia sat by her window, staring into the darkness, her heart burning with a bitterness she could not name. "Even the river listens to her," she would whisper. What has she done that I have not? Her reflection in the bowl of water before her did not answer. It only stared back, dull and ordinary. One night, when the moon hung low and red, Nia visited the edge of the forest where few dared to walk. There, in a crooked hut woven with bones and herbs, lived Mother Zuri, the herbalist everyone feared yet secretly sought. Smoke rose from her fire, smelling of roots and secrets. Nia hesitated at the door, but her envy pushed her forward. Inside, the old woman sat hunched over a bowl, her eyes cloudy yet sharp enough to pierce the dark. "I know why you are here," Zuri said before Nia could speak. "You want what the river gave another." Her voice was rough, like stones scraping together. Nia's heart skipped. "Can it be done?" she asked. Zuri stirred her bowl slowly, the liquid inside glowing faintly blue. "The river holds truth, but truth can be deceived, for a time." She leaned closer, her breath warm and strange. "You can steal a reflection, child. You can take her light and make it your own. But remember this, to steal a reflection is to borrow a soul's truth. The river always takes payment." Nia's hands trembled, but her desire drowned her fear. "What payment?" she demanded. Zuri smiled, her teeth yellow and sharp. "That is for the river to decide." She handed Nia a small pouch filled with river clay dark as night and a rusted blade. "Mix your blood with this and speak her name under the moon's eye. The river will listen. But once you call, you cannot silence it." Nia clutched the pouch, her heart hammering. She nodded without another word. That night, as the crickets sang and the wind whispered through the tall reeds, Nia walked to the riverbank. The world seemed to hold its breath. She knelt on the cool mud, her reflection trembling on the water's surface. "Amelie," she whispered, pulling the blade across her palm. Her blood dripped into the clay, turning it a deep crimson. She mixed it with shaking fingers, her voice low but urgent as she repeated the words Mother Zuri had taught her. The air thickened. The river began to churn. She felt something shift, as though the night itself had bent toward her. A faint light rose from the water, shimmering and alive. It twisted, forming the shape of Amelie's reflection, smiling, unaware. For a heartbeat, Nia hesitated, fear clawing at her throat. Then jealousy silenced it. She reached out and pressed the bloody clay into the water. The reflection flickered, as if struggling, then vanished. The river went still. Nia gasped, staring at her reflection. It glowed faintly now, just like Amelie's once did. The water rippled, reflecting her new light. A thrill of victory rushed through her, washing away all doubt. But behind her, the reeds whispered softly, and the river's surface quivered with a sound like a sigh, low, warning, ancient. Nia did not hear it. She rose, smiling into the moonlight, believing she had taken what she deserved. The river, however, had already begun to remember her name. The night had no moon, only a thick silence that hung over Nthula like a warning. The stars seemed dimmer, as though the heavens themselves refused to witness what was about to unfold. Nia crept through the shadows of the acacia trees, the mirror clutched tightly against her chest, its cold surface wrapped in a strip of cloth. Her footsteps were light, her breath shallow. Somewhere in the distance, a hyena laughed once and fell silent. The river waited ahead, its surface glimmering faintly, dark and endless. Amelie was already by the water's edge, her basket of clean clothes beside her. She had stayed longer than usual, humming softly while the rest of the village slept. The river had always been her companion, her place of peace. Tonight, though, her song carried a note of unease. Perhaps she felt the air shifting, the quiet too deep, too heavy. When she finally lay down near the reeds to rest, her head against the folded cloth, sleep came slow and uneasy. The night wrapped around her like smoke. From the shadows, Nia watched. The glow from Amelie's reflection shimmered faintly on the surface of the water, a soft, golden halo that moved even when Amelie lay still. Jealousy twisted inside her like a serpent. That glow, that purity, that love from the river, it should have been hers. She pressed her lips together, remembering Mother Zuri's words, "The river always takes payment." She shoved the thought aside. Her heart thudded like a drum. She stepped closer to the riverbank, careful not to make a sound. The water looked alive, whispering in tiny ripples as if aware of her presence. Kneeling, she unwrapped the mirror and placed it gently on the mud. Its glass caught the faint starlight, reflecting her trembling hands. "Amelie," she whispered once, her voice low, shaky. The name seemed to ripple across the surface. "Amelie," she said again, louder this time. The air grew colder. She swallowed hard, forcing the third call from her lips. "Amelie." The wind stopped. Even the reeds froze. The river's ripples stilled, flattening into a dark, perfect mirror. And then in that silence, the faint reflection of Amelie's sleeping face rose slowly from the water, shimmering like light trapped beneath glass. It floated toward the real mirror Nia held, glowing brighter with each passing heartbeat. Nia's eyes widened, the sight both terrifying and mesmerizing. She reached out with shaking hands, lowering the mirror into the water. The reflection shivered, then began to stretch, its features warping, twisting, drawn toward the glass as though by invisible threads. The river groaned, a low, guttural sound that vibrated through the earth. The reflection's light dimmed, turning pale, then silver, then finally mist. It flowed into the mirror, swirling until nothing was left. Nia gasped, nearly dropping it. The mirror pulsed once, faintly glowing from within. Then all at once, the river's light vanished. Darkness swallowed the bank. The surface turned black and silent, thick as ink. The crickets stopped singing, the night birds fell mute. Even the air seemed to freeze. For a long moment, Nia could not breathe. The mirror in her hand felt hot, almost alive. Then as quickly as it began, the sounds of the night returned, but quieter, uncertain. She backed away, clutching the mirror to her chest. "It's done," she whispered to herself, half in awe, half in terror. "It's done." Not far away, Amelie stirred. A sharp chill passed through her body. She sat up abruptly, heart racing. Something was wrong, she could feel it, an emptiness around her that hadn't been there before. Her eyes darted to the river, but it no longer shimmered. She crawled to the edge and leaned over. Her breath caught in her throat. The water reflected the stars, the reeds, the sky, but not her. Her face was gone. She blinked, rubbed her eyes and looked again. Nothing. Only the hollow surface of the water stared back. "No," she whispered, touching it with trembling fingers. The water rippled once, then recoiled as though rejecting her touch. The chill ran through her bones. Tears blurred her vision, but even they refused to reflect her image. She tried again, desperate, but the river turned away, its currents shifting in quiet defiance. Behind her, far in the darkness, Nia fled with the mirror pressed to her chest, the faintest light flickering within it like a trapped soul. And the river, ancient and wounded, whispered beneath the stars, carrying both their names into its endless memory. The days that followed were heavy with whispers. At first, the villagers thought Amelie's absence from the morning river was simple illness, but when she returned, carrying her gourd with trembling hands and eyes rimmed red, they saw what she tried so hard to hide. She knelt at the water's edge as she always did, yet the river gave her nothing back. No reflection, no shimmer, no answering glow. The people watched in uneasy silence, and then the murmurs began. "The river refuses her," they said. "She has done something unclean." Children who once followed her songs now avoided her shadow. When she passed through the market, women lowered their voices, pretending to busy themselves with baskets of grain. Some crossed their wrists to ward off bad spirits. Amelie felt their fear like a cloak around her shoulders. Each time she looked into a basin, into a polished pot, into a puddle after rain, the truth stared back at her. Nothing. She was invisible to herself. Her songs died with her reflection. She tried to sing by the river as she always had, hoping to awaken whatever bond had once lived between them, but her voice sounded strange, hollow. The melody drifted out and vanished. The river did not respond. Its surface stayed flat and dark as if it no longer recognized her. When the wind blew, it carried her voice away without echo, scattering it into the trees. Meanwhile, Nia shone. Her skin caught the sunlight in a way it never had before, her laughter brighter, her eyes glowing faintly at dusk. The villagers said the river had finally remembered her beauty. They crowded around her again, brought her gifts of beads and fruit, asked her to bless the newborns as Amelie once did. When she passed, people smiled and said, "The river favors her once more." And when Nia sang, because she began to sing too, the water rippled in answer. But beneath that glow, something restless stirred. At times, Nia caught her own reflection moving a heartbeat too late, smiling when she hadn't, blinking slower. She would turn away quickly, forcing a smile when others noticed. To them she was radiant, to herself she was haunted. Amelie went to the elders, desperate for understanding. She knelt before them beneath the great baobab, her eyes swollen from sleepless nights. "The river does not see me," she whispered. "It turns away. What have I done?" The eldest among them, a woman whose back was bent like a bow, leaned on her staff and peered into Amelie's face. "When the river hides you," she said slowly, "only truth can return you." The words fell like stones into still water, cryptic, immovable. Amelie waited for more, but the elders said nothing else. That night she sat alone by the riverbank, the air cool and still. The fireflies hovered above the reeds, blinking like lost stars. Her fingers dug into the wet mud and tears slid down her cheeks. "What truth have I hidden?" she asked softly. "What have I done to lose your light?" The river remained silent, its surface dark and smooth, reflecting only the moon and the empty sky. She stared until her eyes blurred, wishing for even the faintest outline of herself, but the water would not give it. A hollow ache filled her chest, heavier than the fear of being cursed. It was the sorrow of being forgotten by something that had once loved her. The wind rustled the reeds beside her, and for a moment she thought she heard a faint voice, distant and sad, carried in the current. It was not a word, only a sound, like the sigh of something ancient waiting for her to understand. Amelie closed her eyes, her tears falling into the river, and whispered again into the darkness, "What truth have I hidden?" The river did not answer, but somewhere beneath its surface, it began to stir. At first, Nia thought it was only her imagination, the faint murmurs that came from the mirror at night, soft as wind through reeds. She would wake in the darkness, her heart racing, hearing her own name whispered like a breath against her ear. When she struck a match to light her lamp, the sound would stop, leaving only the hollow silence of her hut. She told herself it was the night insects, the wind against the thatch roof, anything but the mirror lying face down beneath her sleeping mat. But the next night, the voice returned, clearer, echoing from somewhere deep inside the glass. "Thief," it hissed, the sound wet like water moving over stones. "The river remembers." Nia froze beneath her blanket, her pulse thudding against her throat. The air grew damp and cold, smelling faintly of mud. She could almost taste river water on her tongue. She leapt up, seized the mirror and turned it toward the light. For an instant, her reflection stared back, calm and perfect. But when she moved, the reflection didn't. It smiled when she did not. Its lips curled into something cruel, something knowing. She gasped and threw the mirror aside, the glass clattering across the floor. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. "No," she whispered to herself, pressing her palms to her eyes. "It's only a trick of the light." But the nights grew longer and the whispers refused to fade. Each time she tried to sleep, the voice would call to her, rising like bubbles from deep water. "Give back what you stole," it murmured. "The river does not forget." She began to dread the dark, lighting small fires that burned until dawn. Still, when morning came, she found her reflection behaving strangely. It blinked slower, moved later, sometimes not at all. Once, as she combed her hair, she saw it frown while she smiled. The comb slipped from her hand, scattering teeth of wood across the floor. In a frenzy of fear, she covered every mirror in her hut with cloth and ash. But she could not escape her own image. The water in her calabash began to tremble on its own, rippling even when she did not touch it. When she peered inside, it was not her reflection that looked back, it was Amelie's. Pale and silent, her cousin's face floated on the surface, eyes wide but unblinking. No sound came from the lips, yet the expression carried accusation enough to silence Nia's breath. She flung the calabash across the hut, spilling water across the floor. It crawled toward her feet like living silver, forming the faint outline of a face before soaking into the earth. Every morning the same thing. The water would ripple, whispering faintly, and Amelie's image would surface again. Nia stopped fetching water herself, begging the neighbors' children to bring it instead. But even when the calabash was new, when the water came from another well, the reflection would appear by dusk. It followed her. In the shine of a brass pot, in the sheen of a raindrop, in the eyes of a sleeping child she passed on the road, Amelie's face, watching, wordless. One evening, as Nia sat trembling in her hut, she heard the mirror laugh. It was not loud, not even human, just a slow ripple of sound that chilled her blood. The covered glass shook under the fabric as though something beneath it wanted to be seen. Nia backed away, whispering prayers she barely remembered. But the cloth lifted slightly at one corner, and through the crack she saw eyes, Amelie's eyes, staring out, calm, ancient, endless. Nia fell to her knees, shaking. "Please," she begged, "I didn't mean to harm her. I only wanted the light." The reflection smiled in the dark, the same smile the river had once given Amelie. The whisper rose again, this time not from the mirror but from all around her, from the floor, from the walls, from the air itself. "The river does not keep lies." The fire went out, and Nia sat in the dark, the faint sound of water dripping somewhere behind her, as if the river had begun to seep into her home. The days grew harsher, the sun crueler. Cracks opened across the earth like open wounds, and the riverbed of Nthula, once wide and alive with fish and laughter, lay dry and silent. The villagers walked its dusty skeleton in disbelief, clutching empty gourds and whispering prayers. Children cried for water, their lips cracked and white. Goats bleated weakly under the weight of heat. Even the baobab trees seemed to bow their heads. The elders gathered at dusk and said the river was mourning, that its spirit, Ndalo, had turned her face away from them. Some whispered it was because of the blood spilled there, because of the lies that tainted its depths. Amelie watched from the edge of the river's remains, her bare feet pressing into the brittle mud. The wind carried no moisture now, only dust and memory. She felt a deep ache inside her chest, the same one she had felt since that night of betrayal. Though her body had died, her spirit lingered, bound to the river that had refused to forget. Each day she felt weaker, as if the fading river was pulling her further from the living world. And then one night as the moon turned pale gold, she dreamed. In the dream, she stood beneath the surface of water that no longer existed. Silver fish swam around her like threads of light, and the world shimmered with quiet music. A voice came through the current, deep and melodic, like water speaking to stone. "Amelie," it said. "Child of truth, stolen from her reflection." Before her rose the river goddess Ndalo, her skin glistened like flowing glass, her eyes endless as whirlpools. Her hair cascaded in streams that turned into living water as they touched the ground. "Your reflection was stolen," Ndalo said, her voice rippling through Amelie's bones, "but your soul remains clean. The river will not keep a lie." Amelie knelt, tears blending with the current. "Great Mother," she whispered, "the river is dying. The people are thirsty. The land is cracking. Why have you left them?" The goddess's gaze deepened, sorrow blooming in her face. "The river remembers injustice," she said. "When truth is buried, water dries. But if you wish to heal both spirit and stream, you must enter the river's memory." Amelie's heart trembled. She had heard of the rite of memory, a forbidden ritual done only by those who had died unjustly. It meant returning to the first wound, reliving the pain, and facing the truth beneath the truth. Few had ever dared. Fewer had returned. "I will go," she said, her voice steady despite the chill that entered her soul. "Let the river know I am not afraid." When she awoke, dawn was breaking over the horizon, painting the sky with fire. Though the riverbed lay dry, the air carried a faint scent of rain. She took it as a sign. She began her preparations in silence. From her small bundle, she gathered what little she still had: shells from her childhood, a pot of honey saved for offerings, and a lock of her remaining hair, the last tie to her mortal body. Each item she placed carefully inside a woven basket, murmuring old songs her grandmother had taught her. The villagers watched from afar, whispering that the ghost girl was preparing for madness. But Amelie did not hear them. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon where the sun touched the sleeping river. As dusk approached, she wrapped herself in white cloth and walked to the center of the cracked bed. The air shimmered with heat, yet the ground beneath her feet pulsed faintly, as though something still lived beneath it. She knelt, placed her offerings on the earth and whispered, "Mother Ndalo, open the memory." For a long moment nothing moved. Then the ground quivered, and from between the cracks, a thread of water emerged, thin, glowing, alive. It wound around her fingers like silk. Amelie closed her eyes and let it pull her downward, deeper, into the memory of the river, into the truth that had been waiting all along. At dawn the sky blushed with gold, though no rain had fallen. Amelie stood at the hollow bed of the river Suma, clutching her basket of offerings. The thin silver thread of water that had awakened the night before now shimmered brighter, stretching toward her bare feet like a beckoning hand. She stepped forward, unflinching. As her toes touched the liquid light, the earth sighed beneath her. The riverbed cracked open, not with violence but with grace, and water poured upward instead of down. It rose around her like silk curtains, folding her in a cold, luminous embrace. Amelie did not struggle. The water wrapped around her waist, her shoulders, her face, until the world above dissolved into liquid light. But she did not drown. She did not gasp. Instead, she found herself standing beneath the river, breathing as if the water itself filled her lungs with calm. She looked around, and the realm of the river spirits unfolded before her eyes. It was a place of impossible beauty, endless currents that glowed with memory, drifting forms that shimmered like glass figures. Spirits of men, women, and creatures moved through the water, each holding something glowing before them, reflections suspended in orbs of light, like lanterns that floated in slow dance. Some smiled, their faces peaceful. Others wept, their reflections cracked and dim. Every reflection pulsed softly, connected by streams of light that fed into the heart of the current. Amelie walked carefully, her steps leaving no ripples. The water hummed softly, a song she recognized from her childhood, the lullaby her mother used to sing when bathing her by the river. The song came from the spirits themselves, a rhythm that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. As she moved deeper, the light around her grew warmer, golden. Then, from within the shimmering current, a figure rose, tall, radiant, and crowned with waves that flowed endlessly into the unseen distance. It was Ndalo, the river goddess. Her voice carried like thunder whispered through silk. "You have come, child of song." Amelie bowed her head. "Mother Ndalo, I seek what was taken, my reflection, my truth." The goddess's eyes, vast as whirlpools, softened. "It was not merely your reflection that was stolen. When envy took what was yours, it unbalanced what is sacred, the harmony between truth and image. The river no longer knows whom it reflects, and so it mourns." Amelie's chest tightened. "Then I must reclaim it. I must make it right." But Ndalo shook her head gently, and the water shimmered like moonlight through her body. "To reclaim what is yours, you must not destroy the thief. You must forgive her." Amelie's voice faltered. "Forgive her? After she cursed me to silence, after she made my people fear me?" The goddess raised her hand. Around them, images of the past swirled, Nia kneeling at the river, chanting forbidden words, Amelie's reflection twisting away into the mirror, the river darkening in sorrow. "Forgiveness is the flood that cleans deceit," Ndalo said softly. "It breaks no mirror, it washes it clear. You cannot heal truth with anger, child. You can only restore it with grace." Amelie stared at the visions until they dissolved into bubbles that rose and vanished. The water around her trembled with quiet understanding. She felt the ache of betrayal, but beneath it, something purer, something unbroken. Her reflection had been stolen, but her spirit had remained whole. "I understand," she whispered. "The lie lives only while I hate. If I forgive her, the river will see me again." The goddess smiled, her face glowing like dawn. "Then the river shall rise once more." The water beneath Amelie's feet began to move, swirling faster, pulling her upward. She looked around one last time, at the spirits holding their lanterns of truth, and felt their silent blessing. As the current lifted her toward the surface, she whispered to herself, "Forgiveness will be my flood." The light above widened until it became the sky. When she emerged, gasping softly, the air was no longer dry, the scent of rain filled the wind. The first drop of rain fell with the sound of a heartbeat. It struck the cracked clay outside Nia's hut and hissed softly, sinking into the thirsty earth. Then another followed, and another, until the sky, long silent and cruel, began to roar. Clouds gathered above Nthula like dark spirits waking from sleep, their bellies heavy with long-withheld mercy. The villagers ran from their homes, staring upward as if witnessing a forgotten miracle. Inside her hut, Nia sat before her mirror, trembling. Her eyes were ringed with sleeplessness, her hands raw from clutching the glass night after night. The mirror no longer showed her clearly. Its surface rippled like water, and sometimes she swore it breathed. She had tried to hide it, to bury it, but no matter where she placed it, beneath the bed, behind the door, under a mat of woven reeds, she could still hear it whispering. The voice of the river. The voice of what she had stolen. "Thief of light," it hissed in the dark. "The river knows your name." Now, as thunder cracked across the horizon, the mirror began to pulse faintly, like a living heart. Nia's breath quickened. "Please," she whispered, backing away. "Please no more." But the glass trembled violently. A jagged line split across its center with a sound like bone breaking. From the crack, water began to leak. First a few drops, then a steady stream, then a rush that spilled across the floor, gleaming with silver light. Nia screamed, stumbling back, her feet slipping in the spreading water. The reflection, Amelie's reflection, was bleeding out of the mirror, shaping itself in liquid form, eyes closed, serene. The sight tore at Nia's heart. The reflection opened its eyes, Amelie's eyes, and for a brief, unbearable moment, it looked at her not with hatred but sorrow. Outside, the villagers shouted in awe as rain began to pour for the first time in months. It came down in sheets, soaking the earth, filling the air with the scent of life. Thunder rolled over the hills, and lightning flickered against the distant baobabs. The people danced in the downpour, tears mixing with rain, calling out that the gods had returned. But inside Nia's hut, the storm was stronger. The water gushed faster from the mirror, the walls shaking under its force. Nia fell to her knees, clutching her head. "Amelie," she cried, her voice breaking. "Amelie, forgive me. I didn't know what I was taking." Her plea was swallowed by the roar of the flood. The mirror shuddered, its surface now more cracked than glass. The reflection within smiled softly, a smile of release. Then, with a final shattering sound, the mirror exploded into fragments. A torrent burst through the hut, sweeping everything, mats, bowls, herbs, into the open air. The villagers turned, gasping, as a surge of river water erupted from Nia's home, carrying the shards of glass into the rain. They watched as the pieces scattered into the mud, each one catching a flash of lightning before vanishing beneath the rising flood. The water flowed with purpose, racing toward the dried riverbed that had once been Suma. And then it happened. The ground trembled and the river returned. It came not gently but with the force of truth. Water spilled into every crack, every hollow, filling them with gleaming life. The villagers fell to their knees, weeping, laughing, shouting praise. In the heart of it all, Nia knelt outside her ruined hut, soaked and trembling. Her hands reached toward the water, her voice barely a whisper. "Emily." The river answered with silence, a silence that was not cruel but complete. The last of the glowing reflection faded into the current, and for the first time in years the river ran clear. The rain did not stop, it deepened. The sky tore itself open, and the storm howled like a beast unchained. Wind screamed through the huts, tearing thatch from roofs. Lightning laced the clouds like veins of fire. The once empty river now swelled beyond its banks, surging with power, curling around trees and homes as if reclaiming what was always its own. The villagers ran to higher ground, their cries lost in the roar of thunder. But then, amid the chaos, the river began to glow. At first it was only a faint shimmer, a silvery pulse beneath the waves. Then it grew, spreading like light spilled from the heavens, until the entire river blazed with luminescence. The water rose higher, swirling into a towering shape. Its surface rippled, forming eyes vast as moons and lips that shimmered like molten glass. The river spirit had awakened. It was the face of truth itself, born of storm and memory. The villagers fell to their knees in awe and terror. The air vibrated with the spirit's voice, deep, echoing through the very bones of the earth. "You stole what was not yours," it thundered, its mouth forming from the rolling current. "The river gives beauty but demands honesty. To steal truth is to poison water. To live by deceit is to thirst forever." Its eyes turned toward Nia, who knelt in the mud, trembling. Her hair clung to her face, her body drenched, her heart pounding like a drum of fear. The glowing water circled her, curling around her like serpents of light. She tried to speak, but her voice broke into sobs. "I was jealous," she cried. "I only wanted to be seen again. I didn't mean to." But the spirit did not let her finish. The glow around her grew harsh, searing. The reflection she had stolen began to move on its own, peeling away from her skin like molten wax. It screamed, not in pain but in the agony of truth. The villagers gasped as they saw the impossible. Two Nias, one hollow and gray, one radiant and false. The false reflection twisted, then cracked, its borrowed beauty shattering into streams of silver that flowed back toward the river. Nia collapsed, gasping as the shimmer left her body. What remained was her true form, smaller, dimmer, her eyes sunken with regret. She bowed her head to the ground, sobbing into the mud. "Please," she whispered. "Please forgive me." The spirit's face bent lower, vast and silent. The lightning slowed, the thunder faded into distant grumbles. From the other side of the rising flood, Emily stepped forward. Her body glowed faintly as if the river's heart pulsed within her. The villagers parted in silent reverence as she waded through the water, her white cloth clinging to her skin, her expression calm and sorrowful. When she reached Nia, she knelt beside her cousin and took her hand. The touch was gentle, warm despite the cold rain. Nia looked up, startled. Emily's eyes shone with something deeper than pity. It was forgiveness, full and unflinching. "I forgive you," she said softly. "Not because you deserve it, but because the river deserves peace." The spirit of truth trembled. The storm froze mid-breath. The raindrops hung suspended in the air for a heartbeat. Then, with a long, resonant sigh, the entire sky went still. The lightning ceased. The thunder dissolved. The clouds parted to reveal the faint blush of dawn. The villagers lifted their faces, tears mingling with the last drops of rain. The river spirit's face began to fade, its voice now soft as the current. "Forgiveness restores the flow. The lie is gone. The truth returns." And with that, the glowing form dissolved back into the river, leaving behind only calm water, and two women kneeling in the mud, holding hands as the first light of morning touched their faces. When dawn finally rose over Nthula, the world looked reborn. Mist curled softly above the river, now full and glimmering like a polished mirror stretched across the earth. The air smelled of wet soil and new beginnings, of promise after grief. Birds sang for the first time in months, their voices weaving through the trees as if welcoming life back into their wings. The villagers stepped cautiously from their huts, staring in disbelief at the water that once betrayed them but now shimmered with gentleness. Children ran barefoot to the banks, laughing, splashing in the shallows. Women filled their calabashes, the weight of despair lifted from their shoulders. The elders stood in silence, their wrinkled hands trembling, whispering to one another that the river had forgiven them all. Amelie approached quietly. Her steps made no sound against the damp earth. The storm had left her changed. Her presence seemed lighter, almost translucent, as if she carried a piece of the river inside her. The villagers bowed their heads when she passed. Some whispered her name with reverence, others with apology. But Amelie did not seek praise or pity. She simply wanted to see her reflection once more. She reached the edge of the water and knelt. The surface rippled slightly as a soft breeze moved through the reeds. For a long moment she hesitated, afraid of what she might or might not see. Then she leaned closer. There she was. Her reflection smiled up at her, gentle and calm. The face was hers, yet different, deeper, wiser, touched by something ancient. Her eyes no longer held the innocence they once had, but something far greater, the stillness of the river itself. The pain, the betrayal, the loss, all had been washed clean, leaving behind only the clarity of understanding. Her reflection blinked in perfect rhythm with her own, no longer stolen or fractured. It felt alive again, whole again. Amelie smiled faintly, tears mixing with the morning dew. She touched the water, and this time the water did not turn away. It embraced her touch, sending ripples that shimmered like liquid sunlight. Behind her, Nia stood silently, her face pale and drawn but peaceful. The storm had drained her strength. Her once bright beauty had dimmed, replaced by a quiet humility. She carried no mirror now, only a simple clay pot. She knelt by the river, filling it carefully, then offered it to an elderly woman beside her. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were soft. Days passed, and Nia continued to come to the river every morning. She spoke little, working with others to fetch water for the village, tending to the gardens that now flourished. When children ran by, she smiled faintly and told them, "The river remembers kindness. Always be truthful before it." No one mocked her anymore. No one feared Amelie. The sisters' story became a quiet song whispered at dusk, a reminder of what the river could take and what it could restore. The elders gathered under the great baobab and declared that the drought had ended because truth had returned to the water. They said the river Suma had merely reflected the hearts of its people, and when those hearts grew clean, so did its flow. From that day forward, before anyone took water, they offered a drop of honey to the river and spoke the words, "May truth stay clear." As the sun climbed higher, Amelie looked once more into the glistening current. Her reflection smiled again, not as a separate being but as one with her. The river's light caught her eyes, and for a moment, it seemed the whole of Nthula shone through her gaze, calm, infinite, and free. Seasons passed gently over Nthula, and the river became the pulse of the village once more. The drought was a distant memory now, spoken of only in whispers by the fire when the night turned still. Crops grew tall and golden, children's laughter filled the air, and every dawn arrived to find the river Suma shimmering brighter than before, as if joy itself ran through its veins. Yet even as the years softened the scars of the past, one truth remained unforgotten, that the river had once judged them and forgiven them. Amelie lived in a small hut near the water's edge. Her days were quiet but full of purpose. She tended to the reeds that lined the shore, cared for the elders, and taught the village children the songs her grandmother had sung, songs of gratitude, songs of truth. Her presence was now as much a part of the river as its current. When she walked along the banks in the morning mist, the air seemed to hum softly around her, and the surface of the water rippled in recognition. One afternoon, a group of curious children followed her to the shore, their eyes wide with wonder. The youngest, a girl with hair tied in tiny braids, tugged at Amelie's cloth and asked, "Mother Amelie, why does the river sing differently when you pass by?" Amelie paused, listening. Indeed, the river's usual gentle murmur deepened when she stepped closer, a soft, melodic hum, like two voices harmonizing beneath the flow. She smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling with warmth. "Because," she said, kneeling to their level, "the river and I keep no secrets. It knows my heart and I know its song." The children giggled, dipping their hands into the water, feeling the soft pulse beneath their fingers. Amelie leaned closer and whispered, Do you want to know what makes the river stay alive? They nodded eagerly. Truth, she said. Every drop carries it. When you fetch water, you must speak your truth, even if it is small, even if it trembles. The river listens. It forgives, but only honesty makes it sing. From that day on, before sunrise, the children of Nthula would gather by the banks and sing little songs of truth, confessions, dreams, and wishes carried on gentle voices. The river would shimmer faintly in response, rippling with light as if smiling back. Sometimes, on nights when the moon hung low and silver, villagers would pause and listen to the water's lullaby. They swore they could hear two voices instead of one, Amelie soft and clear, and another, deeper and ancient, like waves breaking on eternity. It was said that Amelie and the goddess Ndalo sang together, their melodies woven into the river's eternal current. Some said the song kept storms away. Others believed it was a promise, that truth and forgiveness would always live in Nthula's waters. When travelers passed through the village and asked why the river's surface glowed so strangely in the moonlight, the elders only smiled and said, "That is the reflection of forgiveness. The river remembers every lie, but it remembers mercy longer." And indeed, under the night sky, the river Suma shone like a ribbon of liquid glass, its light flickering gently across the banks. The water moved with the rhythm of peace, and when Amelie walked by, the ripples brightened, singing softly, the voice of a woman and a goddess intertwined, carrying across time, across hearts, reminding all who listen that truth, once freed, never drowns. Under the silver glow of countless moons, the story of Amelie and Nia became more than a memory, it became the heartbeat of Nthula. The elders began every gathering by retelling it, their voices soft yet commanding, reminding the young that truth is the only reflection worth keeping. The river, once an ordinary stream winding through dusty plains, was now sacred. It was called the Mirror of the Spirits, and people journeyed from far-off villages to see their true selves in its shimmering face. Lovers often came at dawn, walking hand in hand through the mist, their hearts trembling with hope and fear. They leaned over the glowing surface to test the purity of their love. If their intentions were true, the river granted them a reflection, two faces shining side by side, their smiles merging with the morning light. But if one harbored deceit, the water turned cloudy and only ripples stared back. The villagers said that the river could sense lies the way wind senses fire, instantly, sharply, without mercy. Mothers brought their daughters to the banks to teach them honesty, just as Amelie had lived it. "Do not lie to your heart," they'd whisper, "because one day the river will hear it." Even the chiefs sent offerings of woven baskets and carved bowls to the goddess Ndalo, whose name now echoed through every blessing. They said she guarded not just the water but the truth that flowed within it. No feast began without a drop of river water poured onto the earth, a symbol that truth must feed all things before abundance can return. As seasons passed, the legend deepened. When the moon was full and round as a drum, villagers would gather by the riverbank. They'd light torches and sing Amelie's song, the same one she taught the children long ago. The melody carried softly across the water, blending with the gentle rush of the current. On certain nights, when the air was still and hearts were pure, people swore they saw a second reflection beside their own, the faint image of a young woman with kind eyes and hair that shimmered like flowing water. "Amelie," they'd whisper in awe, "the keeper of truth." Children grew up believing that if you ever told a lie near the river, it would follow you until you confessed. Farmers who cheated others in trade found their fields flooded mysteriously, while those who shared honestly saw their crops thrive even through harsh seasons. The river rewarded and punished, not with malice but with justice, echoing the ancient words of the spirit of truth. The river gives beauty but demands honesty. Old Nia's name faded from the story, softened by forgiveness. The elders told the children that she had been the first to understand the cost of falsehood. Some said her spirit still lingered at the water's edge, helping lost travelers find the courage to face their true reflections. Others believed she became one with the current, her sorrow washed clean by Amelie's mercy. But none spoke of her with hate, only with a quiet sadness, a reminder of what happens when vanity blinds the soul. And so, through generations the legend lived on, not carved in stone but rippling gently across time. When strangers asked the people of Nthula why their river shone brighter than any other, they would smile and say, "Because it remembers." And as the moon rose high above the water, casting its silver path across the surface, the elders would end the tale the same way every time, their voices fading into the sound of the flowing current. Truth may sink, but it always floats back to the surface.